everybody, Emily here with Bossed Up, and I am so excited to welcome you to our weekly Career Crush Q&A. Today we are so delighted to have Cris Caruso, a financial expert and total boss lady, joining us today from Washington, D.C. As you can see, I'm not in my normal office setting. I'm actually just getting off a 6-city tour for the hashtag Bossed Up USA tour. I just spoke at South by Southwest on Monday and held a power hour here in Austin last night, so I'm still crashing in my family's lovely Austin abode. So that's what's going on. And if you hear from some four-legged friends of ours, we've got doggy family members around too. But it is so exciting to have Cris on today. You can follow along and ask your questions live. Please join me in being the interviewer using that hashtag Career Crush. And you can also continue this conversation, especially if you're watching this far after the fact. Like if you're watching this on YouTube, Cris and I are bosses when it comes to Twitter and social media. We love to keep the conversation going. So even if you aren't joining us live, you can continue to connect with us on Twitter at BossedUpORG and Cris_Caruso, and that's Cris without an H, Cris_Caruso with a C as well. Cris, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
I love these conversations because, to be quite frank and to be quite candid, since you're hearing from a very hoarse and a little bit tired Emily right now, these are the conversations that we showcase really inspiring and incredible women who've achieved like pretty incredible stuff in their work lives and personal lives, but we get to talk frankly about how we got there, the good, the bad, the ugly, the challenging, the exhausting, and everything in between, and get that sort of behind-the-scenes look at how you got to where you are today. So thank you so much for joining us, Cris. And tell us, just to get us started, what you do with Ameriprise Financial, with your own firm here in Washington, D.C., and how you got into that and what you love most about it.
Sure. I am a part of a 5-person, woman-owned financial planning firm here in Washington, D.C. We're small, high service-oriented practice, really team-focused. There's 3 advisors, so there's 2 other people that do what I do. We've got 2 really great team members behind the scenes that make things just magically happen. They're amazing. And I have been with Bump Financial Group for 10 years. I have been a financial advisor for the last 4 years, running my own practice and seeing my own clients. I moved to DC, 10 years ago. I moved to the Mid-Atlantic area about 11 years ago with a job change. And I went from a small 40-person software company to a large corporate company, and I wasn't loving the culture change. I had a lot of autonomy. I was traveling a lot. I loved my clients, but I didn't like the shift. So one of the first people that I met when I moved to Baltimore was Denise, who was the Bump in the Bump Financial Group, and she had invited me to come and work for her. She needed somebody to come and love on her clients, and I needed something to do that was different. So we just made a plan for me to come work for her for about a year and figure out what was next for me and for her practice. So that end of the year, I did a lot of exploring. I did a lot of trying to figure out what was next for me. I was working in the hospitality industry. And trying to figure out what was next for me. And I really realized that this was it, that being in financial planning, being in an education and service-focused practice that specializes in working with women specifically was really where I wanted to be. So I sort of stumbled on the finance field. I'd always had an interest in a background or an interest myself. I had a financial advisor myself, and I had an interest in personal finance, but 4 or 5 years of really hard work and studying and learning sort of landed me where I am now, running my own practice.
I love that, and thank you for being so candid on that front, because so many women I work with at Bossed Up come to Bossed Up or come to our flagship training program, Bossed Up Boot Camp, because they're like, can I give myself permission to make a really big career change? Can I go from one industry to the next? Can I go from, one siloed out sort of career path to the next? Because so often, I think especially in the past, that kind of mobility was less possible. And now you've gone from teaching in a teaching field to the nonprofit sector, to the corporate sector, to being your own boss in the financial sector.
Yeah.
What gave you the courage to make this most recent leap in particular? Like, what made you see that as a possibility? And then what inside you pointed you in that direction?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I give Denise so much credit for bringing me on and seeing the opportunity and seeing the potential in sort of knowing what my skill set was and knowing that I had, so my background, like you mentioned, I've got my education. I have a degree in gender studies and music education. I decided really early on I didn't want to teach in the public school system, so I fell back on my work skills in the hospitality industry. But if you take those two things together, and that service and that education, it's really what we do. Coming into a woman-owned practice, coming into a small firm and not one of the big brokerage houses, really gave me an opportunity to just sort of grow a little slower than I think I might have been able to if I'd been at a big brokerage house. I wouldn't have done this in another path, like in a different pathway. But that year really gave me the time to assess, like, what's important to me. I've always known that teaching is important to me. And so when I was working on the corporate side, I was teaching, but I was teaching hotels how to run computer systems or how to make more money. And that didn't tie in with that value for me of meaningful work. So while I was still teaching, I wasn't feeling like I was leaving my clients or the world a better place.
Right.
So when I really thought about, what Denise was doing with her clients and what the other advisor and what Ameriprise overall, which is why we partner with them as our corporate, headquarters, what they're doing, really lined up with those two values for me of education and service. And then me being able to find my own niche in the GLBT community and working pre-DOMA and specializing in that, and even post-DOMA, and women, and just sort of being able to grow organically in a practice has been awesome.
And it's so interesting, right? And I want to dive into that a little bit deeper if we can, because taking your personal passion areas or things that you feel values about, like your core values as a human being, and then finding a way to take the skill set that you're good at and what you can deliver on and what you're able to be, as Nicki Minaj says, dope at what you do, right? Like taking those skills and then combining them with your passion. I think that's pretty much the American dream as our generation is redefining it, right? Like especially the millennial iteration of the American dream. And what I love about this conversation is that it doesn't happen overnight. Like this is a lifelong process. So share more on that, if you will, but also let's talk about DOMA for a second. Let's talk about, because I think outside the Beltway, people are like, what the hell are you talking about? Where does money fit in to living your best life, the life full of love and the life full of security? Like this is important for women. This is important for the LGBT community. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so, I'm, as a woman and as somebody who sort of never thought that a traditional marriage was going to fit into my life, either because Prince or Princess Charming hadn't come along and, helped sweep me off my financial feet and take care of me for the rest of my life. Yeah. Because the legal structure that I was, having relationships under wasn't supporting, a marriage with me and a female partner. And so I knew that I needed to sort of understand that. I needed to understand the repercussions of certain decisions that I might be making, or that my clients were making. But just as somebody who is a proponent of women's education, of my own education, I worked for the Girl Scouts for years, so educating young women is really important to me. It just seemed natural that sort of specializing in strategies for women and talking and educating women about money, which is emotional and which is scary and can be overwhelming and seems hard, just sort of made sense to line into what was important to me. And then adding that, working with and protecting non-married partners, whether they're same-sex partners, whether they're opposite-sex partners, what are the things that we need to do prior to the federal government saying, you have a federally recognizable marriage? What do we need to do to protect ourselves, especially as women in these situations?
And it's funny because it fits into the whole bigger piece of the puzzle around women and men paid, you know, the gender pay gap that we continue to see perpetuated. And then the fact that women, I think, are just the targets of so much consumer, you know, advertising, right? So there's so much of society saying, hey, ladies, here's how to spend and not save your money. And we don't necessarily get sat down at 10 years old or 15 or 20 years old with mom and dad to say, all right, you're going to manage the bills of the household, so let's make sure you know what you're doing. I just feel like that education piece is so critical to women's empowerment and to anyone's empowerment. But financial freedom is just that, right? It's not good or bad. Money is not good or bad. It can be used for freedom's sake. So I bet that we have a bunch of viewers on here today. Hey, everybody. I bet we have a lot of women on who have some financial questions for you, too. I encourage everybody to use that hashtag CareerCrush to continue the conversation. But what kinds of advice do you find yourself giving your clients over and over again to give them the basics of how to start taking control of our financial lives?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest piece is know what comes in and know what goes out. And we all live in, you know, I live in Washington, D.C., and when we live in big cities, cost of living is high, but, you know, getting to a point where you can spend less than you make. Right. So step, knowing what comes in, knowing what goes out. I spend a lot of time with my clients, you know, talking about their values and talking about how they line their values in how they spend their money. Right. And I'm a big proponent of this concept that you guys are, you know, that just totally lines up with the whole boss philosophy is you can do anything, but you can't do everything. And that comes down to like how we spend our time, but it also comes down to how we spend our money. You know, we can travel, so if travel's really important and that's a value, then maybe that means less dining out. Or maybe it means less anything else. You know, maybe you use your gym outside and you don't pay for a gym. However that balances out, lining up with how you spend your money and how you live your life and what's important and picking and choosing so that you can spend less than you make so that you can be on track for retirement, so you can do those things that are super important and reach those goals so that you can take a sabbatical, so you can explore those career changes. You know, when I left and said, okay, I'm going to go into a commission-based business and I'm going to run my own practice, I had to have some money stocked up because I knew that it was going to take me a while to build up an income stream. You know, so just being able to make some of those decisions, and money is to be able to make those choices of career leaps or changes or taking a break from a job that isn't healthy or a job that just isn't fulfilling you, to be able to say, I can leave, or a relationship, to be able to say, I can leave this because it isn't working for me and I have a financial cushion to take some time away from it.
And it's so important to recognize, as you said, that like nobody's really able to do this for you. This is a choice you need to make for yourself to say, I'm going to take charge of this because I deserve my time and attention to my money, right? Like taking time out to invest in myself, whether that means, you know, bringing in professionals who can help us or educating ourselves or just sitting down once a day, once a week, once a month, where our goals are. You know, where you pay attention to, where you direct that energy is like a budget of your time as well as your money. So one of my questions,
and I feel as we know, figuring out where the best flight is for our next vacation or where the best happy hour deal. And if you're spending more time thinking about that than knowing where your money goes, then that's a great place to refocus some energy.
This is such a good point. So what if your goals do include starting your own business? Because I know we also get a lot of women at Bossed Up who are entrepreneurial. I think everyone these days has some kind of a side hustle going. And how did you make the leap to starting your own practice? And what did you learn along the way that you would give as advice to other women who are considering starting their own business or being their own boss on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I had never, like, it was never on my radar to run a business. Never in my dreams was this, like, something, if you asked me where I'd be, this is not it. So I have sort of learned as I've gone along. I think, some of the key things, one of the big things, and I still struggle this, is, get paid what you're worth. Ask, get that number. And when I tell people, I've had to really build up a lot of confidence to say, this is what I charge, and this is how I work, and this is what I do. And this is how much it costs. And just being okay with that. And as women, I think, I talk to other male financial advisors because obviously it's a male-dominated field, and they don't blink to ask for twice what I charge, which probably means I need to raise my fees. But but some of that is just, knowing what my worth is and being able to say that and to be able to say, this is what my time costs. And that's taken me years to figure out how to have confidence around.
How did you figure that out? So let's get really specific here, because that's so critically important. And I do a lot of trainings to help women with negotiation from a salary, employer or employee perspective. And what I always say here is, don't make it personal. It's really not about you at this point. It's about what this market values this work at, right? So how did you go about figuring that out? And I have to say also, I never anticipated having my own business. So learn as you go is a real thing. And I just tweeted out that quote. I'll be tweeting on the side here, ladies. So if you see me doing that, I love that.
Yeah, and I do think I'm a little older than, some of your average bosses. And so, thinking about, going into my 40s, starting a business and being in my mid-30s and saying, okay, this is a leap that I'm going to take at a point when, I'd hit all those 28 and 29-year-old benchmarks. I had a great job, I had a 401k, had just bought a house. And when I hit 35 and I said, I'm going to do this, I took a big step back in terms of what I thought my life was going to look like, because it put a lot of things on hold. But I think the benefit for that in the long run is that it's going to accelerate the other things that I want as I look 10 years out into my life. But it really has been learn as I go, and talking to Denise, talking to other people who run at businesses, other advisors, and really just being humble enough to say, hey, I don't know how to do this. Show me.
Right.
Tell me how you do this. Other successful people who do what I do, and who don't do what I do, but who run businesses, getting to know other people who are similar, attorneys, CPAs, things like that, and really just inviting them to coffee and saying, I'm starting my own business. If you were me, what would you do? How would you do this? What advice could you give me for getting new clients or marketing myself? And people want to help you. They want, especially women, they want to help you. And, and then you sort of take and pick what's best and what works and what doesn't. And, you take what works for you, and you just sort of what's in line with your values and sticking with that. And I do keep coming back to that, is sort of sticking in line with my values, because when I'm doing things that don't feel authentic, I'm not happy. I'm not happy at home. I'm not happy in the work that I'm doing. And so some of that's really been figuring out, like, who do I really want to work with?
I'm going to jump in there because I think you're hitting on another core facet to what we believe in at Bossed Up, which is that community is key. Mm-hmm. And if we start to see each other as collaborators, not competition, and sort of get ourselves in this position of, I can be confident in what I'm doing and also humble and vulnerable and honest about what I'm not doing well or what I want to learn more about, that opens up this possibility for connection with other people you admire or might even find yourself feeling jealous of, to say, can we work together? Can we learn from one another? And I think it's such a basic essential to our psychological well-being, right? To have, like you're mentioning Denise constantly as being this boss and mentor to you, which is such a great takeaway for women. What role do you feel like mentors or peers, sponsors, or community, whatever, has had in your navigating these big choice moments and being able to take big risks?
Yeah, it's been huge. I mean, I'm really, really fortunate in that I have, my family has been really supportive, even though it's sort of been a little non-traditional or a little kooky, and they're like, yeah, go do what you got to do and figure it out. And, I know that I'm blessed and privileged to have that safety net, and having peers and having, other professionals that I feel like I can have really frank conversations with. And, knowing what the goal is and knowing what the vision is when my sort of past professionals are like totally launching their careers, what appear to me to be like 10 times faster than I am. But knowing that like this is my path and this is what I'm doing, and that it's slow and steady sometimes, and the self-employed entrepreneurial thing isn't necessarily fast, but when it clicks and it takes off and it goes, and it's worth the heartache.
I'm so glad. Yeah, I know, right? I mean, it's weird because we are, as entrepreneurs, I think we are making an investment in our futures, and we're taking big risks, and there's really no guarantee that it'll pay off. I think it really relies on us to learn from both failures and successes and then reiterate.
Yeah.
I was sitting on a panel at South by Southwest this past week with 3 other female entrepreneurs in the digital entrepreneurship space, and the topic we covered was digital entrepreneurship and womanhood. And essentially we covered things like burnout, but also gender gaps in how women versus men pursue business. And one of the key findings that started off our conversation was that entrepreneurship has been seen as like one of the most reliable forms of wealth generation for women in particular. And there's a boom of women entrepreneurship happening right now, especially women of color are like the #1 fastest growing demographic of entrepreneurs. So despite that reality that more women than ever are starting their own businesses, we still have a lack of access to capital and investors, and there's these institutional barriers that continue to be in our way. So I guess from a financial expert's perspective in particular, and as someone who started your own small business,
yeah,
do you feel like entrepreneurship is a good way to grow your fortune, to grow your wealth? And if so, like for whom and under what circumstances? And how do you feel like this is the choice you've made, as opposed to those colleagues of mine who are like making $250K a year in some corporate ladder climbing situation?
Yeah, and to me, it's especially as women, and there's this idea, and I talk to my clients about this, that there's enough. How much is enough, and what is enough, especially when we're talking about money and income and salary. Because I could be making a whole lot more money working a corporate job, but I'd be traveling a lot, and I'd have really high expectations about productivity. I'm productive, but I'd be having really high expectations of the number of hours that I was working, the availability that I had to my employer. And so there is a little bit of a compromise that you make when you say, I'm going to do this, which is amazing. I mean, I keep talking about the Denise, but she and her wife just had a baby, and because she runs her own business, we were able to adjust her schedule so that she was able to take a significant extended leave to be home with her wife, to be home with her baby, to do that. I don't have kids, but I can see that for women as a way to be able to take care of your family and do what you need to do, but also still know that you have that flexibility and freedom to set your own hours, to set the capacity for work. And to say, you know what, I'm going to work these next 6 months, and I'm going to work my butt off, and I'm going to stockpile a bunch of money because I know I've got some other events happening that I'm going to want to cut back to maybe part-time or just regular full-time because I need to be able to slow down. So I feel like that's the payoff. And maybe we work a little longer, or maybe we work a little differently, but I think that's the payoff that we get where if we were working corporate jobs or we were working for somebody else. So for me, it's that freedom, it's that flexibility, it's the things that I also need, in my life, to spend time with my partner, to be at the gym, to be doing the things that my dogs, to be doing the things that are important to me.
Yeah.
I have time. Where if I had a corporate job and I was on a promotion track, I probably wouldn't have the time to do.
It is interesting, right? Because that is such a common reason why we pursue entrepreneurship. But it's also, as someone who worked in politics, if y'all watching haven't figured this out already, I find it pretty fascinating that we're hacking into a broken system, right? So being an entrepreneur is sort of the flexibility argument is only valid because we're a first world country with no paid parental leave protections for all workers, with like a really fragmented paid sick leave um,
Absolutely.
situation, right? So like this shouldn't be the way that we have to get that
Absolutely.
flexibility. I think
Absolutely.
and so hopefully our discussions, especially after this current election cycle is behind us, can be more about how every worker can get those protections.
Yeah, and I mean, our healthcare, I'm a firm believer that our health benefits shouldn't be tied to an employer, and they also shouldn't be tied to a spouse
Right.
or significant other. And same thing with like life insurance or
Yeah.
other, retirement plans. Unfortunately, you're right, we're working around a broken system, but, I'm hoping that there'll be change around that politically, and there's lots of ways, to sort of work around that.
Yeah, I
And
was gonna say
that
like entre-
changes.
right. Entrepreneurship is a great solution in the meantime because Bossed Up, I started Bossed Up because I'm impatient with political change, right? So it's like, how do we give people the tools to take charge of their own lives in the meantime, psychologically, emotionally, financially, fiscally, work-wise, and entrepreneurship totally is that answer
Right, and
for us.
also know that as we're looking at 2016, we're in a strong economy, but thinking about clients that I am working with now, and a lot of your bosses, came out of undergrad or grad school in 2008, 2009, and there weren't jobs to be had. So the way to make a paycheck was to figure out how to make your own paycheck. So there's also a lot of stability as an entrepreneur from some of those economics that
Yeah.
I follow a financial advisor, and knowing that if I have the capacity to create my own work, there will always be work, and I'm not at the whim of whether somebody else is going to lay me off or somebody's going to hire me or what market conditions look like.
And so I think an important component here to speak to the folks who are in the corporate ladder environment is that entrepreneurship is more accessible, I think, to anyone now with the technology that we have available to us than ever before. That's where the rise of the side hustle, I think, has created a bridge between full-time employment through an employer versus getting your foot into the entrepreneurial space without risking it all. So
Yeah.
how did you, and I guess this will be my last question or so, because we do need to wrap things up, but how did you make that transition? And I know it sounds like Denise like took this chance on you and gave you this like opportunity. What did that look like? How did you advocate for yourself in that process? And how would you advise others to do the same?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that when I started, we were just three of us. And now, we sort of are this small business. And so being the kind of people we believe in, we're putting in place the benefits, we're putting in place the things that we now, as a big enough firm, can offer. But the transition was tough, and the leap was huge. And I don't think I knew quite how huge it was in that first year that I made that job from the corporate leap to this, because I still had that stability of a paycheck and a job and a really defined role. And then as that morphed over those next 2 to 3 years, where I moved into a support role, and basically became a sponge and just spent as much time learning as much as I could, and just having wasn't all, I'll be really frank, and it wasn't always pretty, and there was a lot of tears, and there was a lot of self-doubt, and there was a lot of, questioning whether I was doing the right thing, because it was scary, and, having to create my own paycheck for the first time in my life at 35 felt really scary.
Yeah.
But, I just sort of stuck with it, and some of that's just been a matter of time being on my side and sticking with it, and, it's better than I could imagine.
Yeah, right? And I think
Just to
I've been there. I can say I've certainly been there. So then let's actually end on this real question, which I think is the perfect follow-up on that. Like, how do you, in the past, especially during those challenging moments, like, how do you stay what I call personally sustainable in that we obviously don't want to burn out. I didn't want to start a company to help women fight burnout and then burn out along the way. So I'm actually looking at the rest of this week as like, okay, how am I going to fit in more self-care and be more deliberate about this because I'm tired. So what have you done and what do you continue to do to set healthy boundaries, to invest in yourself, and to have a life outside of work so that it doesn't become our obsession.
Yeah. I think that one of the things that has flourished along with my financial planning practice is my yoga practice, is knowing that 2 to 3 times a week at a minimum, I have to create that time and carve out that time to be on the mat. And whether that's having an accountability partner to say you're going to meet me at class, or hiring someone to come to me and saying,
Yeah.
going to come and we are going to do this practice for an hour, because it's fitness, but it also keeps my brain balanced. It's all the things for me. And then making other time for, and turning things off, like
Yeah.
I'm saying I'm taking the time, I'm turning off, I'm turning the email off, I am turning the phone off, and I'm going to, spending time with friends, spending time with my partner. Like, that is the stuff that is really hard, but I sort of feel like, what's that adage that if you say you don't have time to meditate, you need to do it twice as long? Because on the days where I don't have time to get to yoga or to get out with the dogs for a walk, that's the day I need it most.
Yes, so true. And it's funny, I was just sitting in on a keynote at South by Southwest yesterday afternoon by Andy Pattycombe, the creator of Headspace, the meditation app that has transformed my life, quite frankly. It's on my phone. And he gave this really concrete argument behind how silence is a thing of the past. Silence is becoming a part of not the modern day-to-day life, and how our brains are we're like physiologically just starting to figure out a productive relationship with technology, because we've created, just because we can work all the time now, just because we can stay tuned in and plugged in all the time now, doesn't necessarily mean we should. And so I actually, to cross those messages here a little bit, I was tweeting from my personal Twitter account, Emily Aries, some of his best takeaways from the South by keynote yesterday afternoon. So if y'all want to check it out, I think you can also watch it online. But it's fascinating.
Yeah.
So Criss, how can we follow up with you to get more information? I know there's tons of women here at Bossed Up who've gone through our program who love working with you. And if we want to learn more about becoming a financial planner or getting our finances in order, like, where can we learn more and connect with you?
Absolutely. So I know that on your website has my information. You have access to my website, my email address. I have a standing offer that I will give anybody who's affiliated with your organization an hour of my time, to either talk about financial planning and their own specifics around their financial life, as a consultation for an hour. And if anybody's interested in learning more about being a financial professional and being a financial advisor, I'm happy to use that time with them that way too. Yeah, I'd love to have more women.
So generous of you. I so appreciate that, and I know our bosses do too. Your time is very valuable. So I really hope you bosses tuning in take advantage of that. I'm going to tweet out at, if you're watching on our page right now, you can scroll down and see more about Criss and click through to her page on Ameriprise Financial there. We'll tweet out that link as well, where you can keep in touch with Criss. And again, just tweet at us, Cris_Caruso, Boss.org. We'd love to continue this conversation. And Criss, thank you so much for your long-standing support of the adventure that has been Bossed Up.
Yeah.
I have to remind folks that Criss was one of our first trainers at our first ever Bossed Up boot camp program in Washington, D.C., where we help women navigate career transition and really tackle work, love, and wellness together in all one weekend. So if that sounds like something that you would benefit from, head over to bossedup.org/bootcamp. Apply now for any of the boot camps we have coming up this year. Our next one's in D.C. at the end of April. Then we're up in New York in June, and all the way up to Boston in November. And based on the Bossed Up USA tour, which I'm only halfway through, but is very exciting, we're going to have to bring boot camp here to Austin, Texas, and to the West Coast, and probably Chicago, like ASAP. So we're getting our ducks in a row and bringing you more as soon as possible. Thank you so much for being part of this adventure, Criss. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it.
All right, bosses, have an amazing day. Keep in touch and keep bossing, of course. We'll talk to you all again soon.